Today we're visiting with Lori and John Tripp, members of Hope United Methodist Church for almost 40 years. Our records show that they joined the church November 25th of 1984. Tell me how you first heard about this church.
You want to go?
It was our triple, wasn't it?
Well, the way we found Hope was that we were going to have our first child. He was going to be born in 1984, so we wanted to get a religion type thing going for our family. So we started looking for churches, and we visited several churches. And we started this probably in the latter part of last half of '83, I guess. And whenever we went to a church, it seemed like everybody was in a fundraising mode. It was time to do pledging. So we brand new to the church, and we walked in. They said, "Get out your checkbook. It's time to pledge, and pledge a bunch." And so we looked at each other and said, "Well, it's a nice place to be." So we didn't go to that one again, right?
Yeah.
We went to the next one.
Okay, sure.
And then did the same thing. And it was just that season or whatever it is when everybody's getting ready to do their budgets, they just make a big deal out of trying to make their budgets. And if you're new to the environment, it's kind of not the best way to start off. But Hope was different. And it was a small meeting place in Schulte Hall, and probably the congregation sat on folding chairs, and there was a little step up in the front, maybe for a piano and a minister, and I think Al Brown probably had something to do with the fact that we stayed at Hope, because he was not a get out your checkbook and write me a check kind of guy, right? He was just sort of, and it was fun, and he liked the Broncos, and it was I would say enjoyable or meaningful, and so I think that's probably how we ended up at Hope.
Yeah, it was very relaxed. You know, in the fall, you know, he was a big Bronco fan, and he had his Bronco stuff on, and he said, "Well, game's going to be starting. Guess we're going to call it a day. We got to get to the game." It was amazing.
And here is his sermon. We have 3 things to cover today. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
And then we're done.
Yeah.
Well, some people have referred to him as folksy.
Well,
You could say that.
I don't know if you get there, but at the same time, yeah. It's,
He was a good people person.
He was, yeah.
just kind of warm. Yeah. And, you know, and I'm not sure where this fits, but when we joined the church, I think he was the pastor, and so he had to ask us lots of questions in terms of,
Yes.
you know, how's your faith going, and what do you believe, and all that kind of stuff. And Lori, he was from a family that came from Austria with some Jewish background, and so Al kind of made her feel comfortable and was accepting, and so it's another reason to kind of stay. So I think a big part of why we're at Hope is probably him.
Yeah.
Well, you started coming to the church when there was only one building. We didn't have the current sanctuary and the offices and the things that have been added since. Do you remember worshiping? You mentioned a little bit about that in the Fellowship Hall.
Yeah, yes, we do. I remember that, Charlie. Well, I mean, so but that's it, I think, right?
So how long after that did they build the sanctuary?
It was being built in '84 and it moved into there. The first worship service was in December of 1984. So right after you two joined the church, we moved into the main congregation. Well, tell me what you remember about that, moving into the larger congregation and sanctuary.
That is so long ago, Charlie. Sure. You got any memories of
I
that,
don't
Lori?
remember.
I don't know if for our particular situation, I don't know if it was such a big deal. It was just going from one little place to a big place, and we were not involved in any of the planning or the construction, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it just seemed like a natural thing to do. It was just happening, and we were kind of carried by the flow.
They must have already done all their fundraising for that before we got there. It was already funded.
That is part of it, you're right.
Yeah,
To get the
we
money.
didn't hear anything about that. They waited a year or two before they started needing more funding.
Well, and you were starting your family? Johnny was born
Yeah,
in 84 or 85?
Yeah,
84.
February.
84.
February
84.
18th, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Good.
you got that right.
Good answer, John.
Well, it's confusing, Charlie, because Johnny was born February 18, 84. Jim was born March 17, 86. So, you know, always have to stop and think who's born when.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyway,
Well, after Al Brown was the senior pastor there, Dr. Vickery came. Do you have memories of Dr. Vickery?
yeah.
What's your memories like? Yeah.
Well, you know, he wasn't like Al Brown. I remember because if he was there after, he did come to the hospital when Jim was born. Because that
Vickery
was
did?
just 2 years later.
Victory did or?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, good.
That
Yeah,
he
good.
came. And, you know, he's a little drier than
Yes.
Al Brown. They're a little more formal,
I-
you know. It was a little different.
I'll be
than Al
honest,
Brown.
I think he was a lot more formal. I think he was from the East Coast. He forgot to take his jacket off when he came to Colorado. But,
That's
I mean,
true.
So, he's, but I think, I don't know, no particular, I think, solid memories that hit home at that point. We were pretty busy with John.
Kids.
Yeah.
It was an adjustment, though. I mean, they were so different. You know, that's the thing that's interesting about the Methodist Church is that what I thought was interesting is that they were always switching
Yes.
pastors, and you kind of get used to somebody. Sometimes you're happy the new guy comes in, and sometimes they're, why did the old guy have to leave?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so you kind of have to adjust all the time.
Yeah. Oh, after Dr. Vickery, Sam Day was the senior pastor. You remember Sam Day?
Sure.
I do remember Sam Day.
Tell me some of your memories of Sam Day.
I love Sam Day. You know, for me to tell you about Sam, I have to tell you about Johnny, because we had Johnny right during that period of time when we joined the church, and he ended up being a significantly handicapped and special needs child, which required a lot of work, not only on Lori's part, but the people on our block, and especially at Hope. It was a little ministry that kind of formed around caring for John on Sundays, which allowed Lori to come to church, because other than that, he was like a 24-hour-a-day job.
Yes.
Somebody had to keep her eye on him. And the people at Hope were very kind, and let's see now, I think Dave Christensen was the guy who started that thing. And then Chris Wyant was part of it, and Barb Herbal at the time. I think Wendy and Gordon, and there may have been some, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but there were a number of folks that kind of took it upon themselves to take John for wagon rides during service, to get him out of the church, number one, so he wouldn't cry and yell and make a big scene, but also they just enjoyed it because they would find out that if you gave him a little love, he'd give it back, and it was really fun to listen to him laugh. So that's another thing that kind of fits right in at this particular
Well,
period.
did you ask for somebody to help you, or did Dave Christensen just suggest that?
Well, I think Dave, didn't he get you involved with that Friday morning, whatever the morning was? That was like a men's group?
Okay.
Prayer group for Friday mornings, and that could have generated from there, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think
that's
that
what
the word, obviously, if you have a child, the word's going to get out. And then I think Dave just took it upon himself, and I don't even know how much effort he took. He said, I'm going to take this guy, and I think a couple people just said, well, give you a break, I'll take him. And so he just started. And then we had a party, a year later, or a couple years later, when we had Johnny's birthday party, and everybody came over, and it was really fun. So I guess that's part of that.
You mentioned Johnny's laugh. I remember Johnny laughing, and that he would have a long cord attached to a truck or a little car.
Yeah.
It was a
And
bus.
as he would roll through, he'd pull it along.
He still does, Charlie. He has not outgrown that at all.
That's exactly right.
It's one of his only toys.
Yeah. So that's a
Well-
big part, and I can just mention this one too. Because the only way I think that people found out of the congregation, the way that people found out about Johnny was that at the beginning of the services, they used to have like a period of time where you have a celebration, like joys and concerns, or celebrations and concerns, or something like that, when people would just, raise their hand. It was like 2-3 minutes out of the beginning, and somebody would tell a quick story about this neighbor was in the hospital, bang bang, and this person over there. And a couple of people, Harvey Triple, I think, was the guy who mentioned it the first time, and said, we got these people that are kind of in our congregation, and they just got hit with a big problem. And so everybody knew, and then I guess it went to the men's group or whatever, but so it was kind of like just organic. It was a need and somebody filled it. So go Hope.
Well, I think part of the reason that Johnny's buddies, popped up on Sundays, Johnny was going to Sunday school, to the nursery, whatever, but of course, he couldn't go to regular Sunday school, age appropriate, because he was special needs and very limited in his capacity. And so he'd be going to the nursery, but then he got too big, and he had no idea,
no
bounds,
boundaries,
and no
didn't
idea
understand
how
bounds.
big he was, and that he had to be careful around these little kids that
Right.
were 1.5 or 2 years old, and it got to be a little dangerous. And so they kind of said, this isn't appropriate for Johnny to keep coming. So then it was before the cry room existed, and it was like, I stopped going because it wasn't always appropriate for Johnny to be in church. Speaking about his laugh, he would laugh if other people laughed, but it was sort of a delayed response. He had a little motor planning thing going on. And so there'd be a joke or something, and the whole congregation would laugh, and then everyone's quiet, and then Johnny starts laughing. It's like, not now. He just, he laughed because everyone was laughing. He was a pretty happy kid, but.
Well, you mentioned Harvey Triple. How did you know the Triples?
Neighborhood.
Just through the church?
Oh,
and
they were
neighborhood
neighbors,
too,
right?
right?
They
Yeah,
lived
yeah,
in
yeah.
Heritage Village.
Yeah.
And there
Harvey was an old Navy guy.
And
At that time, I think he was in agriculture, so he knew a lot about fertilizers. So he gave us some tips on how to fertilize, where to get it, how much, right? Huh?
That's what neighbors are for.
He had a big neighborhood party, and he was a fellow who went to Hope and got the tables and chairs and dragged them to the party and put them on the trucks and dragged them back. But Harvey was a good guy.
Yeah.
And Harvey at one time was a lead usher at Hope.
I didn't remember that.
Oh, I'll guarantee you he was. All right.
that's how John ended up with a job.
Did he pass that on to
He's a
you?
recruiter. Recruiter
Yeah, that
John.
dead go Harvey guy. I should have never taken him up on his fertilizer advice.
Well, we'll get back to that, you being the head usher. But tell me other memories you have of Sam Day?
Oh my God, yes. Sam Day was a little bit like Al Brown, in the sense that he was very easy to talk to, easy going, a little higher energy, I think. And Sam never looked at his notes, but he did have a sermon. And his sermon had a very, very long name. In his sermon, you could tell what he was going to talk about for the next hour. It seemed like that. But his sermon would go from one of the ideas that he put in the sermon title. So he'd pick up on that and he'd talk about that for a while, and he'd roll into the next one, and roll into it, and then it was over. But they're all tied together. But what Sam did for me is he kept talking about the Father and the Son. And the Father turned out, in his stories, the Father always turned out to be a good guy. And the Son was probably a good guy too, but I was focused on the Father. And the message was always, the Father did this and the Son appreciated it. And the Father did this and the Father did that. And I said, oh my God, I'm a Father. And what am I doing? I'm not measuring up so good. So anyway, it's just kind of a constant reminder, right? There's the Father and there's the Son. And I happened to have, at that time, probably one or two I don't think we got the 3 yet, but when was Sam there?
He was there from 90 to 95.
Yep, we had 3.
So, and you had 3 boys.
My 3 sons, yeah. Which
That's
made it-
very interesting that those sermons touched you personally.
Oh, man, they were right on the money. If you stop and, well, I just put myself, he said father, and I said, well, I am one, and then he would tell the story, and in a church, it's going to be a good ending. At the end, primarily his sermons ended up with the father being a good guy, so I thought it would be a good idea to try to be a good guy. But it was personal.
Yeah. And Laura, you have memories of Sam Day?
Well, you know that he, just like Al Brown, had 3 parts to his sermons, and you could follow, you know, what he was talking about, and it all made sense, and they were always great stories.
Yeah.
He told really great stories and
Without notes,
anecdotes.
right? I don't think he had very many notes.
And for some
Or-
reason, we were interviewed by Sam, but I can't remember why. But he was very open. Maybe we were going to have the Joe christened or something. I can't remember
Yeah, some
exactly
famous,
why.
you know, Roger Bear and us had.
But that was Johnny,
Okay,
and their son Ryan.
all right, yeah. So it could have been one of
Baptized
the kids or
together.
something like that. Yeah.
But anyway, for some reason, we were interviewed, and maybe we were in a group, I don't know what it was, but he made me feel really comfortable. You know, just, because I had a lot of questions about, you know, God and Jesus and being faithful, and he says, well, you know, you're not alone. A lot of us have questions, me included, and speaking, you know, Sam speaking, and so
Right.
I thought that was really great.
Others have said that he was probably better personality to connect with people than many of the pastors that they've been
Yeah.
exposed to.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I agree with that.
It was his messages too,
Yeah.
Charlie. I really believe that. I mean, he's all around good guy. I mean, right? He rode a motorcycle, I think.
Yes.
Right?
And he
But-
loved the Broncos.
I mean, you got 2 things going for you right there.
Those are the good times with the Broncos, weren't they? Those are the good decade.
That's right.
It was easy to be a Bronco fan.
Well, after Sam Day, Margaret Hankins came to be the pastor, and she was the first woman pastor at Hope. You remember Margaret?
I do remember Margaret. Margaret was there for a long time.
Yes.
And Margaret was an interesting person. One of the things I remember about Margaret is that she liked to essentially have people working around her and getting things done. So I was walking down the narthex with her one time, and she said, and oh, by the way, that needs to be done, and that needs to be done, and that needs to be done. And I walked by and I almost said, Margaret, what do you, I hope you're not expecting me to do that, because it seems like, you know, maybe you are, but, you know, but I think, so, you know, Margaret was there for a really long time. A lot of people loved her. I was just sort of like, okay. I mean, Margaret was a good pastor, but I don't know. Do you have anything?
She followed Sam Day. That was
Yes.
probably tough
I think so too.
to follow someone like
And
Sam.
some people didn't overtly say it, but I think they were nervous about a woman stepping into that position.
Yeah,
Did
they
that
did.
bother you?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, not.
But she was a lot more formal
Yes.
than Sam.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and she was a co-pastor at first with John Lee, and John Lee was a little more formal, certainly than Sam Day.
But I don't know. John Lee, as I remember him, he was a smaller kind of guy, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting because a lot of people I don't think liked his sermons very much, but I did, because he would start with a passage of the Bible, and he would say, okay, now let's dig into this. And so here's some language, right? Where you spend half an hour on about two inches in the Bible of language, right? You say, well, I'll get into this a little deeper, but it was sort of to me like we're going back to college. We got something in front of us. We want to know what it is. Kind of like a law class.
Yeah.
Here's the rule. Let's figure out how it works and everything around it. And I kind of enjoyed his historical perspective in terms of bringing things together and how it came about. So I kind of liked it myself. I think he left after a fairly short period of time.
Yes, he was only there about a year and a half, I believe.
Do you know why he left?
And after he left, Steve Miller was the co-pastor with Margaret. You remember Steve Miller?
I
Yeah.
do. Let's see, now I gotta remember Steve Miller. Where does he fit in the thing?
He and Margaret were the co-pastors from
Steve was there for a long time, right?
97 to 2005, so he was there for 8 years.
I think it was Steve that he played several instruments, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he was
okay.
a musician.
Yep. And Steve, I guess I think for the first time, I noticed maybe some politics getting into the church and the services and the.
You seem more liberal than the other.
Yeah, I think one
Pastors.
day on the Veterans Day or whatever day when you're supposed to go through all the Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navy songs and all that stuff, we didn't mention it, and it was a little odd, and I think that was not so good for me. I mean, I think that church ought to be a place you can go and learn about. Maybe this is naive, but learn about religion and God and all that stuff. But I think as far as present day politics goes, I don't go to church for somebody else's politics, and that bothered me. So I had some discussions with him, and after I had my discussion with him, my friend Dave Christensen said, "You're pretty hard on that guy." Well, I don't know. The next time we went through the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and whoever else was out there, songs, right? I mean, that would just got to me, right? So anyway, that's.
Well, during part of that time, 2003 to 2017, Deb Juarez was the youth minister.
Yeah.
And I know she was involved with your boys. Do you remember Deb?
Oh yeah, she was great. I mean, the boys loved her. And was she the one who started that progressive dinner
I think so.
thing? Yeah, and you came to a few of those.
I did.
We participated in those and did the dessert portion.
That's my memory there. We came here for
Yeah.
dessert. And the kids couldn't wait.
Yeah.
We're going to the trips and we're going to have dessert. And as I recall, you would have chocolate fondue. And the kids just loved it. It kept them active, and it was things that they loved, and it was kind of the end of the evening
Yeah.
that they really looked forward to it. And you were quite the hostess, doing a great job.
Well,
Not that
thanks.
John wasn't, but I know you did most of that.
It was work, because we came up with, fruit and marshmallows, cake, and, setting it up, because there would be like 15 kids, there were a lot of kids who participated in that, so, this whole room was full of people.
We still have some extra fondue pots, Charlotte,
Yeah.
if you know,
That
if you know of somebody who might
was-
be in need.
A lot of work, and it was really fun, and you would get all dressed up in your
Oh,
top
yeah.
hat and
I think
tux.
Sharon too.
That's right.
Sharon, so
Yeah.
that was,
I have a
Those were
picture
really
of me in
fun.
a tuxedo and a top hat, I think, out in front of your house.
really, yeah. I was sure
That is fun.
Those were
Yeah.
fun days, they were great days.
They were great, and I don't remember what happened. Those lasted, I don't know, maybe 5 years or something. They didn't last a really super
Maybe
long
I don't
time.
remember either.
Maybe
Yeah.
when she went away,
Maybe.
she stopped. But I absolutely liked her.
She was real supportive, of Jim particularly.
Yeah.
Was high school and older. I think she was really good.
As I recall, she and Jim would meet for breakfast and
Oh.
discuss matters of faith and
Oh.
growing up and making
right?
adult type decisions when he was
Oh.
in high school.
Yeah.
She
It was
set it
sort
up
of a-
for a lot of kids to come, and Jim, I think, was the only one that
No
stayed
kidding.
with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think not only that, she connected with the youth, and then she looked for ways to get them involved that was meaningful. And this comes back to ushering again, Charlie. My whole life comes back to ushering. But Deb would take it upon herself, and we talked about it, to round up enough kids to do at least one, if not more, of the Christmas Eve services for the ushers. Because you need to have 8 people
Yes.
for 4 services or 3 services, and that's 24 people. And she would come up with at least 8, if not 12 people to do that. And it was really made the evening of the particular day with ushers doable. And I really appreciate everything that she did. And in fact, near the end, her daughter had been through so many of those things that I got to go home after the first service, and she did, just managed everybody
good.
else for the other 2.
Yeah.
So that was really, really, I think, a great relationship. I think she was good for Hope and good for our family
I do.
and good for
Yeah.
the usher corps.
I don't remember who came after that.
We had kind of a mixed bag for a while. There were people there were only short term and
Yeah.
kind of moved on. But Deb was a mainstay for several years.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was
Well,
great.
partly during that time, John, you took it upon yourself to come to the high school, senior high Sunday school class. I remember you sitting in on the class for a few years. How did that come about?
That was one of my activities. I had a memory too, Charlie. It came about because I was a Sunday school teacher just for little guys for a short period of time. Maybe I was even a helper, or maybe, I don't know if they let me alone with that many kids for that period of time. But anyway, I did it long enough so that they gave me an apple with a cross in it, like a Methodist teacher
Yes.
kind of a thing. I still wear that lapel today. So that was my experience with Sunday school, which was, there was a lot of cardboard, crepe paper, and crayons and stuff like that. And so I didn't know what you would do with teenagers, because I had one and then another one behind him. And you had a whole bunch of them all in one place, all at one time. And I was just wondering what was going on in there, because Jim came home and he was a pretty satisfied guy, and I was wondering, what is that guy doing in there? And then I went and I heard stories about Marines and guns and Bibles and hearts and whatever it was, and and then Charlie is going to start the adventure or the journey in one place, and you had to have something to take with you, and you had to have something to the end. But there was a lot of interaction and a lot of interaction going on, sometimes directly with the teacher, sometimes not. And so I was a teacher at the time, teaching college or whatever, and the classrooms were different, right? So I just wanted to see what was going on that made Jim kind of a happy guy, and so I just thought I think I asked you if I could come.
Sure.
And so, and I tried not to really say anything one way or the other. I didn't want to encourage more rabble-rousing, and you didn't need any backup, so I was just an observer. My main purpose was just to go to figure out what in the world is going on here, and how do you communicate with people so that they come back the next time.
I was impressed how well you handled those Sundays
Well, thank you.
with the kids.
My wife came twice, I think, and Sharon just said it was chaotic. And she was a very law and order, follow the rules kind of person, and said,
Yeah.
I can't do that. It makes me too nervous.
Well, I mean, that's sort of where I ended up too, is that you're definitely, from
Your style
from my
with
perspective,
high school
my
kids.
perspective was from your position that you're definitely not really in charge. That's true. You're leading it. I said, but it didn't seem to bother you much, because at the end of the day, you're still in the same room. You still talk to the same people you got through what you wanted to get through, and it's over. But for me, I'm like Sharon. I was just okay. I mean, there's a lot of extraneous things running around here, and I can't follow it all, and so I'm confused, right? So I'm going home. I'm not going. I went for a little while, and I said, okay. I'm not seeming to add much here, and I got out what I could get out.
Well, that reminds me of pastors. You want a pastor that's a spiritual leader and well-versed and a good speaker, but also a good administrator, because they're kind of the chief executive of the church. And it's very unusual that you get a pastor that can do all of those things, because everybody has a different talent or a different skill. And that's kind of the way I look at that yours and Sharon's approach to learning and teaching was very different than mine, but maybe at that time that was good for me. And it was good for me to be in that class.
Yeah, not only that, Charlie, but you did that for how many years?
33.
33 years, and you
With the
had
high school kids.
yeah, and you had enough memories coming from that place to write a book. That's something else that I don't think I want to do is write a book, right? My book would be short.
Well, let's get back to these ministers.
But I do want to thank you for putting me in your book as a memorable event.
It was. It certainly was.
Unnamed.
I remember you being in that class very much, John, and I appreciated that.
Did you? As in your book, it sounded to me like you were not really wondering, did the ministers and the ministers?
That was my own paranoia. I thought
What is
maybe
John Tripp doing
somebody
here?
had a spy in there to report back, said, we need another teacher.
No, far from that. Yeah, and if I knew you had any kind of thoughts like that, I probably wouldn't have done it. But no, I just wanted to see how kids would react, and and how they behave and how they learn, and discussions and stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I'm with Sharon. I mean, I think it's great, but I don't think I'm the person to do that. Which is a good thing for me to find out before I volunteer.
You had no worries about being replaced, Charlie.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about becoming the head usher. That was in 2001,
Yes, it was.
and you're still doing it today, 22 years later.
Kind of, I'm sharing with Pat Lozier now, right? Pat's doing all the day-to-day stuff, and I'm doing the kind of scheduling and whatever the spreadsheet things are to get things going and organized and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
she's the face, right? She's a really nice lady.
Well,
She's like Charlie.
and what prompted you to volunteer to do that?
I'm not sure. Does anybody volunteer for something like that, Charlie? Harvey Triple, another one of my good friends, was a head usher at the time, and I was probably ushering, a lead usher. Speaking about ushers, I did Norm Belinso's team before I ever got involved with the leadership thing for a long time. Norm was a great usher, lead usher, whatever. He always contacted somebody the day before, says, "Our turn tomorrow, show up," whatever. I mean, I don't think people do that anymore.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, Harvey, I guess, made an argument or something that said, you belong here, so why don't you do it? And I said, okay. And so then it became more or less a management thing. Management's probably not my strong suit, but organizing things is okay. I mean, I can do that. So as long as we had 2 services, things went along smoothly. But when we had a pastor who wanted to go to 3 services, and that created an interesting kind of thing, because now you have 3, you got to figure out where people want to go and where they're going to be. And then, because I never really asked anybody to do something they didn't want to do, or would be inconvenient for them, right? If they were in that service
Yes.
and they wanted to usher, that is terrific. You're here anyway, you might as well just do it, and it doesn't take that long. You get kind of a good feeling and make a contribution, and that's good. But I didn't want to ask somebody to go to a different service, from their spouse or whatever, in order to do this job. So trying to staff 3 services was ridiculous. I mean, it was sort of like this summer when we had services. We had 2 services in the summer during COVID, and we had probably I want to say 18 people would be a high number, right? Sometimes 12 parishioners. But if you think about how many people it takes to put on the service, you had 2 pastors, Cheryl, a couple of people in the booth, plus another maybe person around. So you had almost as many people working the service as you have coming, which doesn't really, to my mind, doesn't make very much sense. It's a one-on-one ministry here that's going on. And I don't know if I signed up for that. But anyway, the same thing. So whenever, and then when you go to 3 to 2, there's another scramble, and then people have to kind of pick which one of those they're going to go to. So those times were really interesting, trying to get people, slotted together, and then also you get some people that have been around a long time that like to work together, and so it is actually kind of a mini management thing in terms of putting the people in the right place, so that they kind of get along, and everybody's got the same mission, and they've been doing it for so long now. It's sort of like kind of like does itself, as long as they don't go to 3 services.
Well, I know you've overcome a lot of challenges, and you mentioned that about particularly for Christmas, when you would have 3 services or 4, and trying to get the ushers to help just facilitate the service.
Well, I didn't do that. We asked, I mean, if they wanted to, I tried to give the ushers a break that day and tried to fill it up with volunteers,
Right.
which created a quick training thing, which is, all thing about all by itself. And I used to take great pride in the fact that we could do a candlelight service and get all the lights lit at the same time, and coming back and sort of created an environment that looked like it was choreographed properly, so you could enjoy what was going on instead of wondering why
Yes.
why is that guy doing that and that guy doing that. My mind is everybody ought to do the same dadgum thing and get it going back, and just do what you're supposed to do, and not be random here. And
Right.
So I'll tell you a quick story. We used to have a choir director. He was there for a long time. I can't remember his name. Kind of a shorter guy. He's a great singer. You remember who it was? It may not matter, but he decided, because he was in the front, he was in the directing the choir and all that stuff, and one day he just decided he would light his candle from the altar and go out to the congregation and start lighting people up. And I okay, I'm gonna make you a deal. That's the last time you do that. You pick up another candle in one of these services, and I'm going to come to your choir, and I'm going to sing in your choir, and you don't want that. He said, "Okay."
That's quite a threat. Oh, John. Oh, well, were there other ministers or pastors that we had that you remember in particular?
I don't know. Let's see. I need to see if there's anything in here.
We had Steve Warren and Don Bird.
Well, Don was an interesting character. I mean, Steve had his own thing too. I mean, he was giving his sermon to himself. I mean, I had a hard time kind of digging in, following him, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So, he had bees and all that other stuff. But Don Bird was a pastor who came, and unfortunately at that period of time, Hope was in a financial deficit in terms of we were spending a whole lot more money than was coming in. And Don used to like to spend money. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, people had been asked me a long time to be chairman of the finance committee or treasurer, whatever it is, and then I think one's and then the other. But somehow I ended up being responsible for coming up with a budget, implementing the budget, and trying to get it by my good friend Charlie, who was the chief cheese in the church at the time. Do you remember that meeting?
Yes.
I mean, I'm a college teacher, and I'm not in the middle of all of these multi-million-dollar corporations with, as chief of staff, and I'm staffing and budgets and all that stuff, right? But I can balance a checkbook, which was problematic, and that's because it wouldn't balance. So Don and I had some interesting interactions just in terms of trying to put a control on spending so that we could hold it down. And he was very, very defensive in terms of doing anything that would provide some accountability to figure out where the money was going. And it kind of created an issue because I felt that was my job to figure out where it was going because we didn't have enough. And so Don and I had some very interesting conversations, and I even went to the higher chief council, Methodist hierarchy, and said, "Can you please send somebody out here and interpret what the rules are for me, so we can have a conversation, and so we know what the rules are before we had." So we had a couple people from the district office come out and try to explain what should happen. And the way it's drafted, it kind of depends on what you want to happen. It's all negotiable. Is the answer. You have to play nice, and I didn't play well with people that I thought were kind of going against the
Balanced budget people.
Yeah, well, the future of hope, basically. And we are in such bad shape that it was the first time that I'm aware of that we had to do a supplemental gift giving program to get enough money to make it through the year. And Brooke Mahoney kind of helped me through that process.
Yes.
Because there was no way for us to go from where we were to where we needed to be with the funding that we had. And so Brooke was there, and he realized it, and he said, "Okay, well, I've got some talents, and this is something that I can do." So he took it upon himself to find whatever it was that he did, create a little committee, and had a little pledge program there to get us enough money to get from point A to point B, or at least to the end of my tenure.
Yes.
So basically, I think we balanced the budget that year for the first time in quite some time. So I did not play well, unfortunately. I have it in my little activities of hope. All the ones we've talked about so far were fun. That one was not fun. It was hard.
But in many ways, I think your talents were what we needed at that point. It reminds me of a story. The pastor would like to spend the money, and the chief financial guy said, "You can't do it." And the pastor said, "The Lord will provide." And the finance guy said, "The Lord provided me to tell you we need a budget."
That's good.
I like your story. A funny story. But that was not a fun time in my life. In fact, there's another guy, Bill Eller, is that what? Let's see now. Bill Emmer.
Yeah.
Do you know him?
Yes.
He's another finance guy, though. He spent some time for Hope and all that stuff. But Bill, because I had conversations with Don, and I needed some explanation in terms of where I was and what I was supposed to do, and Bill was very, very informative and helpful in terms of figuring out where people are and what their positions are and all that kind of stuff. So he basically provided me some way to rationalize what was going on and still kind of get through the door with Brooke's help and your help, everybody's help, whoever did the supplemental contribution to get us through that year. That was an interesting time. So it's definitely one that I remember. Right. So, but we got through that one.
Well, and that's the history of many churches. That it's not always sunshine and unicorns. There are tough times and there are good times. And Hope is an example of that. We've had some years where we're doing real well financially, and some where we struggled just to pay the lights and water bill.
Water is an interesting thing too, you betcha.
Where else have you served at the church, John? You were the head usher and you worked with the finance committee for years.
I don't know. I was finance and on that committee for a long time. Just as a helper, right? We used to do like Christmas decorations for the church, and there were ladders in the front when you hang those little green boughs up there. And so when I was younger, I used to do that. And then there was like Nancy Duncan, I think, and Ann Mangelson, and they would sit in the back and they would say, after I'd come down, they'd say, "Can you move that over about another 3 inches?" So, going back over there. So anyway, I did that for a long time. What else did we do? Anything?
Lori, I think at one time you were involved with the children's ministry.
Well, a little bit. I mean, just helping with like bake sales and fundraising for the kids. I can't remember. I don't have a great memory. But yeah, I'd help like with the youth, with their dinners and things
Yes.
like that on Sundays, the meetings. A lot of times I'd be there helping out, volunteer.
Provide snacks or sometimes a meal for the Sunday
Yeah.
evening meetings.
Yeah, for the kids,
Yeah.
the junior high, and during Deb's time, I remember being there on Sunday afternoons a lot of times. And contributing to, they would have like a fundraiser for the youth activities or something, and they'd have bake sales, and sometimes, I can't remember what they'd have like a sale where things were tagged. People would have different crafts that they did, and they would sell them,
Oh, yeah.
and I would bake Lindsay tort.
There was one guy that would always buy it for a bunch. Remember who that was? He lives over by Cherry Hills.
I don't remember, but yeah, there was one person who would always buy that. Look forward to that Lindsay tort every year. He would buy that. It was really nice.
So the other thing is, I guess, we help Dave and Judy Christensen sometimes with their, Dave would do
Spaghetti or chili dinners.
Yes.
yeah, so.
Those are always great.
So we ended up cooking for half a day. All right, anyway. And then a fun thing we did,
Well, and then Jim was a Boy Scout, and he had his Eagle Scout project.
Yeah, that's
And either we suggested it or he did, to do this. They needed some storage, a storage unit outside. They had one that was not adequate.
Right.
So Jim's Eagle Scout project, when he was like a junior, sophomore, maybe freshman.
So he put that shed up, that's
That
right
was
outside
his-
Schulte Hall when you look out the window,
Right.
that
along
was
with
his
a
Eagle Scout
concrete floor.
project.
We had to reroute the plumbing that was coming down the building on the inside because it popped out where we wanted to be, so we had to hook a hose on that thing and sort of reroute the water, and then we did a concrete thing, and the kids mixed it up in an old, one of those, we got one of those cement mixer things, and
Right.
went around and around, and put in the sand and the gravel and take it out and put it in, and kids did all of that, and then he put it up. It's still in good shape, Charlie.
Yeah.
It's kind of sheltered in there, but it works, right? It
Yep.
doesn't leak. It was really interesting.
I had
because-
forgotten that. Yeah.
I'll tell you, it was really interesting. We had like maybe 12, it's hard to get kids to come multiple times to do that, because that was a real project. It was a real construction project. And so we had multiple Saturdays where we were doing like 4-hour shifts, and just to move things along or more. I had everybody there, and then it was on a Sunday, and somebody came outside and they said, my daughter's getting married in there. Can you guys quit hammering? I got 12 people here, and we're scheduled to get a job done, and I don't know. What am I to do, right? I don't know. So we said, okay, we'll go away. But then we had to come, then you got
Come
to
back.
hook everybody again. I mean, trying to hook that many kids for that period of time
Yeah.
is a challenge. Jim did a lot of the stuff, but I mean, you still got to do it. It's just time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it was.
So the thing that's interesting about that, Charlie, so it was actually the summer between freshman and sophomore year, and Jim was experiencing onset of type 1 diabetes.
Oh.
We didn't know it at the time because he really wasn't diagnosed until fall break, the end of October. But, it was onset, so he was really getting really extreme thirst.
Right.
And I just remember during that Eagle Scout project, it was like Jim was taking a break every 15 minutes to just drink water. And like he was the only one doing that. And then 15 minutes later, he'd stop and have to drink water. And it was hot, everybody was really hot, but he was just drinking tons of water. And I just remember seemed like he was taking way more breaks than anybody else, but it was because he had
His body was telling him it needed it.
onset of diabetes, and as the school year progressed, he had more and more symptoms, and then, all kinds of, symptoms of type 1 diabetes, and by the end of October, we were like, something's definitely going on here. But he did get the project done, he became an Eagle Scout, and, it was a good project.
Yes.
Family
Took a village to get that done.
participation. Yeah, multiple families had their kids,
Yeah, I mean,
number
a
of
scout,
families
if
that
it's
participated.
and, a lot of kids do Eagle Scout projects that you can get done in a day or whatever. You build a bench and put it someplace and put a name on it or something, and you're done. This was one that was, I think, deserving of an Eagle Scout badge. We had to do some planning, some budgeting, had to get the money, and then and so the church was kind enough to give them, I think, a couple $1,000 or more dollars just to put that thing out there.
Yes.
So, but he handled the whole thing like that. That was good. I think so. So it's one of the fun things we did, Charlie. Maybe we should do that again sometime. Somebody put together an Enneagram program. Have you ever been?
I've never done one, but I'm familiar with it a little bit.
We did one at Hope, and probably the only person I can remember was Harry Postlethwaite. He was on a happy-go-lucky scale, like the Enneagram has little numbers, and if you figure out which number you are by looking at a paragraph of stuff, and so there's little people who are kind of shy and kind of not very outgoing, and there's people that are crazy and don't care, and there's people in the middle and worriers or not worriers, but Harry turned out to be the number that was happy-go-lucky. So I just remember that was kind of fun, and it turned out that I turned out to be a perfectionist, and it turned out that Lori turned out to be
Mediator.
a listener, mediator.
Mediator.
So, there's confirmation that the Enneagram works.
And your experience was that matched your self-image?
It was.
Pretty much.
I guess I didn't
Pretty
think
much.
of myself the way, I guess, kind of, a listener and try to be accommodating. And that was kind of where I fit, which was on the opposite end of that pie where John was. It was right on target for John. And I guess it was for me too. It was just interesting the way it worked out for a lot of the couples in there. A confirmation of who you were. It was fun.
Lucky.
Well, opposites attract.
Oftentimes, I guess so.
Lucky Charlie. It worked out the right
I
way.
guess if opposites attract and stay together, I guess if they don't fit, maybe they don't stay together. I don't know.
All right.
We've talked about a lot of different things that the church has been involved in your life and your family's life. Anything we've overlooked? Or
Absolutely. There's one thing we've overlooked, Charlie.
All right, let's cover it.
My favorite memories. Several of my favorite memories.
Good.
Right? So what would those be? Jim was in high school, went through, and in the high school class presents a service when they graduate,
Youth
right? They have
Sunday.
sign the high school class, everybody takes a position, and people who do read the liturgy or whatever it is, and organize people and usher and sing and all that stuff. Well, Jim was selected to give the sermon, the message.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a message about being on a bus and getting off the bus and going all over the darn place. But before he started, and that was a great sermon. But before he started, he said, "Before I get started, I want to mention somebody that I learned most from and have a lot of respect for, and that has helped me through my life, living and making decisions. And here I am, I'm dead, I'm in the back of the sanctuary, right in the middle where the ushers stand when nothing else is going on, right in the middle." And Jim says, "And it's my brother Johnny." He said, holy cow, right? It's a good thing the buttons didn't pop.
I remember.
That was, but the point is, I guess, the reason it's a memory for me is because Jim was selected to make to do the message, and I think he did a really good job in his message as well.
Sure did.
That was something I'll always remember. And then following that up, is it 6 years, Lori? 6 years later, Joe?
Yeah.
Is there that much difference
Joe.
between them?
Yeah.
6 years later, they did the same thing. Joe graduated from high school, and they asked him to give the message. And Joe said, and before I start, I want to make sure that I recognize someone who has provided me a lot of inspiration and how to learn and get along and make decisions and whatever. And this time I didn't even puff up my chest. It's my brother Johnny. I knew it was coming this time. Dad, you take the back seat. All right, here we go. But that's, yeah, I think I wanted to get those things out there. Let's see now. Oh,
And
yeah.
then Ann Rowland's song,
Pardon me?
Ann Rowland's song about Johnny.
Oh, yeah, I was
That
going to
was
say,
special.
yeah, Ann Rowland, I don't know if it's wherever that fits, but to go along with Johnny's ministry, Ann Rowland actually wrote a song for
Yes.
Johnny, and it's got him in her lyrics. He's got his little yellow bus on a string and laughing and
The wagon.
wagon, yeah, going down, and it's a great song. And every time she does it, if she looks at me, I start crying.
Of course.
And she has to look away because she's ready to start crying, and so. It was very, very nice, and we did that for several years. That song was hanging around. But
Yeah.
Charlie,
Special.
going back, just revisit Charlie's classroom. I put a note down last night. It was quite an experience. Mayhem is what I had written, which is close to where we were at the beginning. All right, so the other thing I think we ought to be thankful for is the music ministry at Hope.
Amen.
I think that carried me through. You mentioned you have a lot of different pastors with a lot of different styles and a lot of different messages and whatever, but the music ministry, I think, in my mind, has always been terrific. In the depending on what hymns are picked, I get as much sometimes out of the hymns and the language as opposed to maybe the message.
Yep.
If the message misses, kind of the hymn hits. And so, between the two, but the music ministry is just great. Cheryl's great. The organ, piano, whatever she's playing that we've provided for her, she does a very good job on. And then, I think we've been probably blessed with some choir leaders. I mean, the choir, if the leader is responsible for whatever, the choir's great. The whole thing, and I have no idea if anybody's watching this doesn't know that yet. I don't sing very well. I should say I don't sing. So I love to stand people in service that do sing, because then I can kind of just follow whatever it is. I probably do better without the notes in the book, right? Than I do looking at the notes. But anyway, so I
Well,
wanted
there's
to.
so many talented musicians.
Yes.
It's not just the choir, but they have special music and special performances. The brass bands and the kids. I mean, it's really special.
It really is a blessing, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Johnny's song, I think is what she called that.
Yep.
Ann wrote for Johnny.
Yep. She performed it for several times
Yeah.
over a period of time.
Yeah, she's very talented also. One of the talented people at Hope, for sure.
Oh yeah, and that's another part of the music ministry. She got the Red Sea Band, and before that it was something else. But
Yeah.
that's a good way to do that. All right. I don't know, Charlie. Anything?
Well, what would you like to see out of the church for the next 40 years?
Oh gosh, I don't know. For it to keep going.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, it's important to the people who go every Sunday and
Yeah, and
Get
it's
something out
it's a
of the
little different now.
messages.
The Zoom thing and whatever it is, COVID, and the participation from online and all that stuff. And a lot of people do that, and I guess I'm not one of them. But I think it's more fun if we have people in the pews, and you could kind of meet and talk and converse and see people and say hi and actually be there in the flesh and stuff. So I don't know. I'm looking forward, I think, to our current pastor, who seems to have it's a nice blend, and he's not from the East with whatever, and he's not. So far, I think he's I would say apolitical. There's no politics or that I've picked up on or anything like that.
Right.
I think I'm looking forward to him, and I think he takes time in his messages. He uses a lot of stuff, right? Video clips and this and that and the other thing, but he ties it together, and he takes enough time to make sure that whatever he's doing, he kind of brings it together at the end, so that everything is. You could tell that it was well thought out. And when you get to the end, you say, "Well, it was kind of cool. Whatever was happening, Mal figured out the messages."
Yes.
But I'm relatively hopeful here that we can hold on to this fella for a while. So, Pastor Jeff.
I went to one of the meet and greets. That the one that we went to was at the Brookses,
Mm-hmm.
Linda and Chris's house, and it was nice. It was a good idea to meet the two
Yeah. And Pastor
pastors.
Hale.
Yes.
Interesting. Pastor Hale reminds me of Michigan Technological University.
Oh, really?
In a thermodynamics class, and you had to have big, long equations, and in those equations there were lots of variables, and variables drove me nuts for a whole quarter, because variables really aren't variables; they're really variables. They have meaning, but a variable, I'm not even sure what it is, right? But so, Pastor Hale and I are going to have to get back to past a variable thing. But I think he's an earnest man.
I do too.
Inside
Yeah,
of,
like
inside of
both of
him is like goodness. It's almost like, whoa, this is like, and he's got some self-confidence. Give him that, and his children's moments, I think they're kind of long, but at the end of the day, how many people actually sit down with their kids now and talk about doing right and doing good and taking the time to be a friend and help people? And so I kind of appreciate that. I mean, it's pretty, kind of like, and you do good. No, what are you supposed to do? Good. You did good. All right. But I'm with it. I think it's and it's probably a net. It's a positive, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad I don't have to do that, Charlie.
Me too.
Kind of go down deep and figure out what's really in there. Yeah. I don't want to do that. All right. Well,
I want to thank you both for sharing your thoughts and your feelings and things you've learned and experienced at Hope Church. Have we forgotten anything or left anybody out?
we have no idea. We got to put one little guy in here. I love him too. He's a guy who ran around to two people. One is the electrician kind of guy, that Paul Turman.
Yes.
I was on trustees with Paul for a long time. And that's another thing. The interaction I had with Don Bird is that Paul was doing the trustees for a long, long time, and the place was good. And he and another guy did a lot of work, and he's a great guy. But his meetings were long, because we had projects that he always listed in evaluation, and he knew everybody didn't know what it was, and the meetings were going long, and apparently somebody told Don Bird that the meetings were too long and that nobody's going to come if you keep this up, although Paul had been doing it for a really long time. Well, Don basically said, Paul, you gotta make your meeting shorter. And as the end result of that, Paul went away, which I think was a net loss to the church, to be honest with you. But it's, but I think Paul did a great service to the church for many, many years. And then, there's another guy, just, let's see, do you remember his name, Lori?
Bill
Yeah, Bill
Fleming or something
Fleming.
like that.
Bill Fleming. Yes.
So I worked with Bill on the sign for the New Hope sign. Went down with him and had the artist or whatever conceptualize, kind of create the model for the thing, and then a couple meetings. But Bill was instrumental in so many places around the church for so long, and so I want to give a tip of the hat to him. He was a good guy too.
Bill Fleming and Paul Turnland both had experience, and they knew more about the plant, the structure, than any of us. And if somebody said this is not working, they knew where to go to get it to work.
Absolutely,
So who
knowledge.
does it now?
I'm not sure who knows that now.
Yeah, when those people go away, that's no matter what the industry or the office is, that's always a big loss.
It sure is. Sure is. Thank you very much for this.
All right.